I'm the Associate Director at the Center on Longevity, and I have said many times, I'm going to repeat what Laura says, this is our favorite event of the year. I have to say, I'm going to turn 65 in August, and I'm pretty cynical most of the time, but the Design Challenge finals sort of offer me hope for the future. Whenever I see young people sort of tackling what are pretty thorny problems and coming up with unique solutions, I become a little more optimistic, so thank you for that. We always start our day, our finals day, with a speaker, a keynote speaker. And this year we are really privileged to have Perry Klebahn join us this morning. Perry has done it all when it comes to the world of startups. He's a seasoned entrepreneur, a product designer. He was a chief executive, and as well as the co-founding faculty member of the D.school, the design school. I love the story that his first foray into the world of startups was when he created a new snowshoe for his master's thesis, and then went on to launch the Atlas Shoe Company, which I guess I read remains the leader in snowshoe technology. For all of you who need snowshoes, go look at Atlas. After selling Atlas, he joined Patagonia, and after that, he was named CEO of the iconic bag company Timbuk2. And I counted last night, I have 6 Timbuk2 bags. So, Perry, I think I helped. Fast forward, I was reading about Perry, and he said of himself that in the end, his true calling was teaching. He's a founding team member for the D.school startup gauntlet class LaunchPad, the Innovation Leadership course, D-Leadership, and the week-long Executive Education Intensive Bootcamp. And he's also on the teaching teams for the Personal Development course, Designer in Society, and Organizational Change course, d.org. And in his spare time, as I was looking through Perry's background, he mentions that in every class, he guides his students to take a look back in order to discover what to do next, and works from the unshakable belief that it's always possible to see a problem differently. He talks about that with regards to his design courses, and I actually think that's a pretty good life lesson. And he sort of ends his bio by saying that his students often tell him that while they were intimidated by him during the course, they're grateful for the pressure he placed on them to exceed their own expectations. So when Marie and I were talking with Perry about joining us today, he kept saying, I work with a different rubric than you guys use for the design challenge. Is that okay? And I think it is. So what he's going to talk to us about over the next couple of minutes is a different way of thinking about entrepreneurship. So being true to his comment that it's always possible to see a problem differently, I want to introduce Perry Klebahn.
Thanks, Martha. Oh, good? Working? Okay, thanks. Thanks, Marcus. All right, so thanks for that lovely introduction. I was like, who is this person? That's awesome. Okay, so a lot to live up to. All right, so the founders here, I'm really happy to be here. This is sort of, I do a lot of things at Stanford, and it's like my favorite is the Accelerator. And of those, you maybe got a chance to look at LaunchPad, launchpad.stanford.edu. You can read a lot about what I've been up to here. As Martha said, I did a startup out of Stanford, and everybody says this was the startup. There were 12 before that. When I actually went back and looked at my 2 years here in a master's program, I tried 12 different things to get the one that worked. Thankfully, that was a ride that I loved, and then went on and ran other people's businesses for a while, and ultimately came back and have been teaching full-time for 10 years. I'll talk about what I do in LaunchPad, and I think the structure of the talk will be, I'll be very direct, so I'll give you some news for the founders that hopefully it'll come out as a statement of fact, and I invite you to sort of think about it relative to your experience so far related to business planning. I'll give you some data, which if you look at it with one lens, might seem daunting, and with another lens, I think very enlightening. And then we'll talk about some examples of some of the things I do in the program in LaunchPad, which is running right now. You're welcome to come by anytime. So it's Mondays and Wednesdays in the evening. So my background, we went through this. I found the skills of doing a startup. These are what snowshoes look like for those who are from different areas. Before they were wood and rawhide, they were really, really heavy. So the innovation was to do super light ones. Really fun company, and that, of course, got my connection to outdoors, and was a pleasure to work and run other people's businesses for a while. This was the D.school, so Martha talked about this. This is the design school. We teach design process to students. It's basically a set of tools they can use regardless of their discipline. So it creates a really nice environment for students to collaborate with different disciplines. So you have very larger teams and diverse teams, and that's awesome. So if there's a common set of tools and techniques, it allows students to collaborate and innovate. This is where we started. This is where you end up at Stanford before you have money, is in a double-wide trailer. So this is where we started it. I took a leave of absence from Patagonia, actually. We did our first classes in there. And everybody writes their direction on a napkin in Silicon Valley. This was our directive about building future innovators. So the one thing is that top line about building skills, not outputs. So I'm less concerned about the outcomes. I'm more concerned that you have resilient skills to continue to innovate as you go forward. This is what it looked like in there, and it still looks like that. It's kind of chaos. The classes are almost always flipped classroom. So that means that if I want you to read something, I'll have you read it. If I want you to consume a lecture, I'll tape it and give it to you another time, but we work in the classroom. Which for the founders, I think you can understand is you're doing a lot of really risky work and a lot of, actually, I think it's uncertain work. There might be truly nothing at the end of it, which can be really scary. So that's why we do a lot of the work with the students beside them in the classroom. And these are the classes. I'm going to talk a little bit about LaunchPad. It's 13 years. About now, I think it's about 130 businesses have gone through it. You can look at the alumni list. About 60 are still running in some way, shape, or form. And I think there have been 7 or 8 exits. So we'll talk a little bit about how those numbers work out. And the great thing is you're getting all these amazing applications for the slots in here, which is, innovation is a numbers game. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so I'm assuming all of you wrote a business plan because it was kind of required to get into the program, right? So how many of you have stuck with your business plan to date? Hopefully none, because you heard the title of my talk, right? So, okay, so what's the point? So that's one thing is, I focus a lot more on process and experimentation at the early stage. Because if we look at business plans, you can go, ChatGPT writes a pretty mean business plan now. Actually, when we do this, we have students use a scaffold, but we have AI write it for them. Because I think it's a waste of time at the beginning. So if some investor wants to see it, we just generate one very quickly. So a good plan leads to good outcomes, but there's this huge failure rate we see. Even with the program I have, it's a pretty high failure rate if I look at that funnel and work with the students. So this is the data I wanted to share. So this is from Andy Hargadon and Bob Sutton. Did all this data. They captured all of this information about ideas, number of prototypes, number of ideas incubated, and successes in the marketplace. So if you look at this ratio, and this holds up with a bunch of different industries. Andrew Dyson, is an amazing story if you haven't read about it, about numbers of prototypes. But the first column is number of ideas. The last column is a successful outcome in the marketplace, okay? And this was across, granted, this was businesses, startups, all kinds of things. They did the data in all these places. Ideas in the first column, 2,000, 100 things roughly prototyped or built in some way, quickly mocked up. 5 things incubated, and by that I mean sustained as an offer in the marketplace in some way, even though it's not cost effective. So a lot of Silicon Valley talk about do things that aren't scalable. This is when you're sort of turking it, you're doing the offer yourself. And then ultimately 1 success. So these numbers, when I went back through so I have a Slack channel each year for LaunchPad with 13 years. We went back through and looked at the prototypes built, looked at all the data. The number holds true. And it's roughly, if you think about it, the white space here, it's sort of fascinating. Your failure rate is basically 95%. So, welcome to the place where you're wrong 19 times out of 20. That's to me, I can move that into the fact column. That's the way I teach my class. It has nothing to do with, I've taught, in public high school running this program. I've taught at Stanford. The ratio is the same. You can be as smart as you can be. It's an unbelievable number to wrap your head around. So for founders, what are the implications? What does this mean for your startup? What do you need to be able to do? Anybody? What would the implications be if this is true? If you're going to now fail, if you're for sure wrong the next, dozen times about your startup, the prototype you're building, the service you're offering, your pricing, all this stuff, every single time this ratio holds up, if I was right, what are the implications? Anybody? Resilient? Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And knowing this, it means you've got to work in a way that's much, much faster and much, much lighter weight. So that's why, if you think about a plan, if you want to read I've actually given you my book. This book was based on this research I did a while ago as a COVID project. You can now claim you've read the book because I've given you the core premise, which my publisher oddly said that was a really good book talk if someone can claim they've read the book with enthusiasm. I don't know how that sells more books. This is a great, Codename Ginger is a great book about business plans sort of going awry, if you want to look at it. So what's a plan? It's a set of assumptions. So now you spent all this time, you've got these assumptions. Those are actually valuable though, because we'll talk about what the use could be. So if you think about assumptions, the problem is a lot of them are going to be incorrect. So you guys have, market sized your market, you've priced, you've got a mock-up of your prototype probably, you've got all kinds of work. And I think part of it is you need that as a founder, I grant you. It's like you got to have some vision. You got to believe you're going to change something amazing and do an amazing job. And at the same time, that's built on a sort of a foundation of assumptions, And if you think about, okay, now, if those numbers are true, what do I need to do with those assumptions? I've got to phrase them as questions and begin to ask them. And this is, what Martha talked about. I know that you were asked about feasibility, you were asked about all this stuff. So you're thinking like, what is going on? We're getting hijacked at our last thing because this guy's coming in and saying, don't do this. I realized you had to do this to get into the program. So this is widely sort of mixed up. And even if you look at places like Y Combinator and their application process and what they expect you to pitch, and they're all about experimentation, I think very closely aligned with the work I do. They have amazing tools on experimentation, which is what we're going to talk about. They still have some aspects of business plans you have to submit. So it's interesting. How do we take that and leverage it and sort of break down the assumptions and get you through a process of unpacking those assumptions and doing something with them that can actually build the business. So we need to upgrade assumptions to facts. So this is the rubric that we use, and rubric just means a structure of a sentence that we use in LaunchPad. So imagine if you have loads and loads of founders, and we need to quickly come up to speed on the current state of your startup. What we want to do is define it this way, because what's really bad is to let people talk about their startup, because everything takes forever in the class, right? So they get used to this one sentence. Our target user has a problem and wants this product. So it's target user, pain point, and a key feature. And these things fit together. And this sort of statement is in constant flux. So I'm working with startups that I've worked with since January for this cohort. There's 10 of them in the program. And this has already changed for every single startup on the order of, I say, 3 or 4 times, and it'll change another 3 or 4 times before June. So they're going through those kinds of iterations, and I track all this stuff to get the numbers. If you look at it this would be the example for Uber. So this is the way the sentence flows. And what oftentimes happens is, if you don't have product market fit, one of these things, the target user doesn't have the pain point, and the key feature doesn't solve the pain point, and there's no business there. And I'm sure you've experienced this with putting things out there. If you're doing any kind of startup work, and this is this constant sort of variable equation you're trying to put together. And oftentimes I'll just call out here, the thing that gets missed, the most important part of this equation is the pain point. Your solution will absolutely be wrong. I'm 100% sure all your solutions are wrong based on my history. I've just never seen it once in my life. In 130 startups, I've never seen them have the right solution early on. It always shifts and changes, which I think you can kind of get. Your features are changing, how you sell it's changing, your user could change and therefore it changes it, but the pain point is what's important. If you can find a pain point that's unique, that nobody else has found, and define it in a unique way, that's really where the big businesses out of LaunchPad have gotten built. And so how do you upgrade and de-risk? Experimental method. So we'll want to talk about this. So I'll go through the steps, and you've got these handouts, and you're welcome to any of them. My email will be on this, and you could reach out to me. I'm happy to share all this stuff. A lot of it's up on my website. You can use it for LaunchPad, and it's all built really working with past founders. The other thing about LaunchPad is with 13 years, I can really see what tools are resilient and continue to get used particularly in the first 2 years after the program when it's very, very difficult. So this is the hypothesis. There's an example in there: target user, pain point, key feature, and driving the startups to be specific about them. That's one thing. Is going to be super general. I can have one of you has a finance product for any kind of teenager to learn how to do finance. That's very, very broad and likely correct because it's so broad, but it's very hard to experiment against. So one of the things we do is we relentlessly work with founders, using alumni and using other company founders to get them to focus. And you'll see why, because it makes it much easier to experiment and move forward. And then we get into this aspect of being able to ask a critical question. So this is the thing I think that comes from your assumptions, is figuring out what are the big questions you should be asking of your own startup. There's sort of a weird sort of psychosis or neuroses with founders. At one time, you need to stand up here in a minute, you're gonna pitch. And when you do that pitch, you gotta be totally sure you're right. But then when you go with your team, I would advocate you gotta be totally sure you're wrong. So I grant you there's a weird dichotomy. Sometimes you gotta be this person over here that has this vision, I'm all about changing this, invest in me, and that's all true. It's a distortion field. And sometimes you gotta go and ask some critical questions. This is where we work a lot with founders to build this skill and really sort of differentiate the risks in their startup. And you wanna be focused right now on what are called deal-killing risks. And what I find founders sometimes, because they've written a business plan, get on sort of path-dependent risks, meaning they're worried about, how do I do this key feature of my product? How do we implement this? One of you has a game. How do we build this game? Who do you think is gonna manufacture it? What do you think our costs would be? You wanna back up and say, are there any things about my core hypothesis I wanna test right now? Because they're deal killers. If I'm not right, the business will truly not function. It wouldn't matter if I could build the game, right? So you move forward and do that. And we'll go through an example. This gets kind of confusing, but it's actually really not. These are the experimentation sheets. So you see that hypothesis, you see a key question, and then this is where students in the class are building their experiment. They're talking about what they want to measure, so you have to have metrics. The experiments we do must have decisions that you put users to. They can't be qualitative. So we don't allow surveys, and we don't allow any qualitative interviewing unless it's after the user's made an experiment, made a decision. So we're putting something out in the world, getting people to make decisions, and I'll show actually a longevity example from this year. A student of this programmer is taking some classes here. But we structure the experiment, and I'll go through this in a second. And this is the example of sort of the decision is, a lot of times the teams will use websites. So they're using a lot of AI to do these things quickly, because you'll see on the order of dozens of websites they're campaigning. So they'll use AI, they'll build a website, and what they don't do is here, what they do is here. So asking people what they think, maybe that was useful a while ago to get inspired about the problem, but we find it entirely useless to eliminate risk and get through that column quickly. So we structure things like, if you have a product right now, for you it'd be asking users, do they want to sign up to be a beta user? In some cases, you could price an offer and put it out there. We'll show an example of that from a student that just did this over the last weekend. The benefit is we quickly move through those columns. If I know I'm likely to be wrong, I'd rather be wrong quick and redo it and work with something resilient and fast change like a website that I can recampaign and I can quickly retask that material. So they're thinking, like, we'll talk about this with experimentation, but they're thinking the primary skill I need to be good at the beginning is doing experiments really quickly and generating data and be able to move forward with conviction. So, and this is the thing we measure at the end. So last night we got together, compared all these experiments. There were 10 startups, and we experimented, how much did this founder or founding team learn? What's the value of it? Versus time spent, And in some cases, some of the experiments took 10 hours. In some cases, they took an hour. In some cases, they learned a lot. And we sort of talk about it and talk about also for any of the founders that are spending hours and hours, how can they speed up that time? How can the next experiment be much, much faster? So, and then I want to go through an example, and I'm happy to take some questions and put this into context. So this was founder Weston, and I think Weston's going to be on a panel with you all, either today or tomorrow. He is working with kind of your target audience. You can read this. So 50-plus-year-olds, his main pain point is loneliness. I think that one of the key things he's now focused on, this is an older one, is target users that recently faced a loss of a partner and have acute pain around social connection. And he's going to connect people with others and stay active. And he went on, and this is his work. And I actually will show some of the results. But he ultimately built an amazing website, which I'll show in a second. His idea was, I'm going to put users to a decision to sign up. He actually even got them to pay money. And so before this, Weston's idea was largely qualitative. It was based on qualitative interviews, interviewing folks at old folks' homes. He'd done about 100 interviews. Everybody had expressed pain around loneliness, but he'd never really put his idea out there. Would people come to an event? Would they actually take action? His company's going to be called Goldie. Would they actually want this product? And he's heading into a world where capital is scarce and a lot more expensive. And the big push in LaunchPad during the time I'm with them is to get people to some glimmer of proof about their product market fit, that target user pain point and key feature. And that's what this is an example of, is sort of having the boldness to have his key question be, would somebody even sign up? Okay, so imagine the transformation of this business. So that's the biggest risk. And his action was he's going to build a website that explains the company mission, its product offering, happening soon, and we'll also have a sign up for membership, CTA, waitlist button, multiple points of sale. So anyway, he's going to put somebody to this website, and they're going to take action. So this is a website. I didn't want to scroll it live, but this is what he built. That's the home. So this is as you would scroll down the page, this is what he put together for Goldie. Hopefully it strikes you as credible, as something that exists, as something that's real. All of the features, all these things. He's put out events now. You can apply for membership. All these things were active. I forget that he didn't build this on Wix. He built it on another AI builder. I forget which one. But these tools are amazing. These are, somebody with these are no code tools he's using, so there's no coding required. And he ultimately, so what came out of this, actually, I don't have the data from the experiment. So running this experiment, he had 100 target users hit the website, 20 signed up, so that was conversion, to be on the wait list, and 8 paid. So he's now on the hook to do an event, so it's gonna happen. But imagine the transformation of the business, okay, in this experiment. He put something out, his target user now, it doesn't prove his hypothesis, but it helps him refine it. Because who's his target user now? Who does he base his target user? If he had 8 people pay, 20 people sign up, and the other 80 take no action, how does he figure out who his new target user is? The paid people. Yeah, we're capitalists. So it's like you got to survive. So he's going to go and pay attention to why in the world did those 8 out of 100 sign up? What is the unique aspect? How do I understand their unique aspects? So you do qualitative interviewing, but you do it with the decision. So what he has now is he has those interviews queued up. He's going to talk to those people. He's going to really understand what's unique about their pain point relative to those general categories. And he can then dial in the copy, and he also knows who to market to, at least to get into business, right? The businesses grow. So the other thing is scale. Like you're at the beginning of, if LaunchPad's an example, you're at the beginning of an 8-year journey. Mine was 10 years with my startup, but 8 years on average for those that really get to an exit. and get to something successful. So think about it, you've got a lot of this coming up. So what Weston's got to solve for, and you're absolutely right, is I got to get into business first. I got to get some customers that really are a group within the group within the group that really want my service and are willing to slap a credit card down on a brand new website, and they have that kind of pain associated with this and want to get it solved. And the other thing is, he's developing in public. I think oftentimes startups think, I got to get all this right, and then I'm going to show it to somebody, and then it's all going to work out. And I've seen the opposite. The more you put things out authentically with your user, somewhere on here, I think I cut it off. I always require the founders to put a folio at the bottom explaining who they are. You know, this is not the class Elizabeth Homestuck, right? We're gonna do this right. So they got to put their name there, tell them they're a student, tell them they're passionate about it, and that they're working on it. And he can now develop in public with those people. So he gets some feedback. He's going to adjust the website, show it to those 8, and continue to hone his offer. Even the event schedule, he's going to run it by the 8 before he runs the event. You know, so it's a great example, hot off the presses. But behind all this, this is the kind of work Weston's been up to. You know, this is his 6th version of the website. Users tested with 60 plus is now 160. He's got feature direction. He's got a list of key features that are 15 long. I think there were 6 on the website. He's found 30 plus pain points, hours in interviews, 100. Community partners engaged 20 plus. So he's been to 20 plus elder homes, getting out there and sort of building up the connections to launch his product. But this is sort of the result of, from a plan about doing an event-based business for elderly and elder care to actually now combining it with data. This is where I think I want Weston to leave knowing he has a startup and continue to work on it, or knowing he doesn't and can pivot and change. Well, we still have time and it's still super low resolution and can adjust. So that's kind of the core idea. You've got these handouts from LaunchPad. So for all your founders, you can have all these and more if you want them. We do the same thing with pricing. We do the same thing with pitching. We do the same thing with fundraising, over and over and over. So with that, I'll open it up, got a couple minutes for questions, but I'm happy to, one thing that's hard is I sort of lay out a concept, and I wanted to leave time if there's somebody who wants to talk about their startup in relationship to this idea of experimentation. So with that. Any questions? Yeah.
A question regarding Atlas.
Yeah.
As a person who's interested in the outdoor industry, I find it tough to tap in with the innovation that has happened across the board, right? And I look at something like Atlas, where it's that seems kind of like a natural transition in the evolution of snowshoes. How do you approach looking at a landscape today, outdoor industry specific, where there has been so much innovation in all these sports, and find a window or a lane to be able to dive into confidently?
I think, so looking at things like the innovation doesn't have to be on just the product or service. It can be on go-to-market. So imagine, we have a couple medical startups that'll need FDA approval and all this stuff. And it is a relentless path to commercialization for them. If they go, and there's some great programs here, so they pursue that. But we also sort of try to innovate go-to-market strategies. So taking that back and how your product gets to market is a huge innovation. I think if you tend to put your product in the same channel as everybody else's, if I've got the board game and it goes wherever the board game is, that's not very differentiated. It's going to cap my price at the average board game price. It's going to do all these things. In outdoor, there's a company called Evo. I don't know if you're a skier, but EVO, that completely innovated the go-to-market strategy. So there's nothing innovative about their product offer. They offer skis and yeah, they're killing it. So they crushed some incumbents with all this infrastructure, and they also crushed some online people with a focus on service first, a focus on a different kind of sales process. A different experience. Once you buy products there, you can go to their hotels, you can go have a beer, you can do skiing and beer tasting at the same time, you can be part of their demo thing. It's just they rethought all of the friction points. And they said, well, it's not about product. What if all the product's really good now? Skis are really good, boots are really good, all this stuff's really good. Well, let's not worry about that. Let's worry about what users are saying, which I don't like going to REI, buying my stuff, calling it here, having this thing, going to this, all these things. So they sort of noticed something different, and they defined a different pain point for that same target user. I think the pain points are changing all the time. So it's the more you can sort of put your radar out and listen. All of you have these target users. Is you're listening to like, how is it unique? How do I have a unique pain point? And what can I do quickly? The question I always ask as a founder, what can I do quickly to test that hypothesis? Weston's was 10 hours of work. That website now is a resilient test. He's already running other experiments. So if you go look up Goldie, you'll see it's all live. You can take a look at it. He has new features he's campaigning today. Tomorrow, he's going to try to figure out with that what the event should be. Anything else? Yeah.
Hi, thank you very much. This is
Sure.
fantastic. It struck me, unfortunately, I'm a career academic. It strikes me that what you're suggesting here is very much akin to the process of research and discovery, which is you have to be, we were talking, you have to be sort of arrogantly confident and humble at the same time. You have to be willing to try out fragile ideas early and get feedback early. So I just want to suggest that there is a strong parallel between what you're talking about and the way academic scholarship, I think, ideally unfolds.
Yeah. It's classic experimental method. It took me going and talking to academics about how to run good experiments. And the idea with having a really good question at the beginning was one of the things I kind of glossed over, but that's very, very powerful.
And failing early
often
is really important.
And also for the founders, seeing that as, I'd almost ask a different question. Are we failing enough? Have we put some stuff out there that somebody doesn't like? Great example is pricing. So founders, I would say, I don't know you all personally, but I'll say this, what I've found to be true, and what's true of me in my experience, is you vastly underprice your product. You sheepishly go to market. And we do a lot of pricing experiences. One of the requirements is you run a series of experiments on pricing your product with a subscription, pricing it this way, that way, whichever, putting in this channel, that channel. You do all these different experiments, but we require a certain number of no's, meaning we absolutely want you to know the high mark for your pricing. And I think that's a different way of thinking is, am I pricing it where I want to know what the maximum price is? I want to know when everybody says no. That's a good thing to know as a founder. And I think that's a really healthy way to think about maybe experimentation is, are you doing experiments where you're really a priori seeking a no? I'm actually seeking the limits of this. I want to know how few features I can launch with where it still holds up as an offer, because it's a lot of work to launch this thing. That would be an experiment. And think about and if you want to reach out to me, there's other ways to do it. A B2B business, I told this is a B2C, but B2B, we use emails. And we have a group of people doing a bunch of stuff that's a product for doctors. And they tend to show doctors, they send them emails and then show them sort of a workflow that they're going to change with AI. And they can get the same kind of reactions. Yeah.
Hey, Perry. You used the term user as if it was a homogeneous group.
Yeah.
But some markets, the consumer, the user, is not homogeneous.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to try to design and build a product that will, work for everybody. Now, in the markets that I work with, people with disability and older adults, everybody is different.
Yeah.
And although that there's a slogan in this market that you solve for one and extend to many, that just doesn't work in some markets.
Yeah.
And you had an example there of only 8 people out of 20 that paid. So that's
well, this is,
difference.
and you're right. This is a great example. So thank you for that question, because I didn't want it to get super confusing. But he actually has, and you can, when Weston comes, you can talk to him about it. So his hypothesis here at the beginning, right? Anyways, whatever, it's somewhere. So the hypothesis he has the 50+ person, right, who's lonely and all these things. Can you think if he has actually 3 other users he's testing with? Who would be 3 other users for that product? Think about who might pay for a product. If you're doing an event for older folks, adult kids. They're because what's their pain point? Let it out, get it out there. Yeah, I'm worried about my dad. I'm always like, is he seeing anybody? Is he doing anything? I can't get up there all the time. So that's the other thing. He's campaigning it actually today with the parents of the people seeing like, what's their reaction? Because maybe the right thing is they should pay. And the parents, I don't know. He's trying to figure it out. He's just saying, I don't know. That's my hypothesis. And the other one is the facilities themselves. He's finding a certain tier of facility really wants great programming. They're ravenous for it. And they'll give space, they'll help with, so it creates all these things, but he has just multiple hypotheses, if that makes sense. He has a hypothesis for the end user. We have a product has this really cool system for stroke rehabilitation. So they're doing the same thing. They're showing it to the patients first. Does this help? Does this make a difference? They're showing it to the families of the patients. They're showing it to doctors, and they're showing it to the people reimbursing. So it gets really confusing. So you imagine these classes can sometimes be super confusing. You get all these experiments, and we're evaluating all of them and giving feedback real time. And that's the key, though, is cycling through these experiments, meaning they're all hypotheses. I don't know which one's going to be the right user for Western or the one he's going to ultimately focus on. He's probably going to have to focus on a single one just to get the offer out there. But he's doing the experiments. And the cool thing is what he's built with these websites is ways to show the product and show the vision of the founder. He has a vision, like you all, that he wants to change something dramatic for this demographic. But he had to put it into something to be able to show them to be able to show it to these people and basically get the yeses and nos to move through that funnel. So with that, we're at time. All right. Well, I'm around. So founders, I'm around. If you want to reach out to me, my email's on the presentation, and all these handouts are in the packet.